The challenge came on a Tuesday morning when the mountain mist still clung to the pines like smoke from a distant fire. Chloe Martinez was hunched over a Winchester Model 70, her weathered hands moving with surgical precision as she adjusted the trigger mechanism when the stranger walked into Rocky Mountain Gun & Sport, carrying an attitude that could cut glass. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Heard you're the best gunsmith in 3 counties, he said, his voice carrying the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly how dangerous you were. He wore civilian clothes, but everything about him screamed military. The way he scanned the room's corners, how his hands stayed visible but ready, the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Chloe didn't look up from her work. "Depends what you need fixed." "Nothing broken," the man replied, setting a hard case on her counter with deliberate care. "Name's Marcus Reed, Special Forces. I'm here because someone told me you might be able to hit targets most people can't even see." That's when Chloe finally raised her eyes, and Marcus felt something cold crawl up his spine. Those weren't the eyes of a small-town gunsmith. They were the eyes of someone who had looked through a scope at distances where the curvature of the earth mattered, where wind patterns became as important as heartbeats, where a single shot could change the course of history. "Whoever told you that," Chloe said quietly, "was mistaken." But Marcus had seen that look before, in the eyes of operators who had done things that would never make it into official reports. He opened the case, revealing a custom rifle that cost more than most people's cars. 4,000 meters, he sighed. "There's a target range up in the mountains. If you can make that shot, I'll buy every rifle in your shop." Chloe's hands never stopped working, but something shifted in the air between them, like the moment before lightning strikes. Millfield, Montana existed in the kind of isolation that either drove people crazy or made them disappear entirely. Nestled between peaks that scraped the belly of passing clouds, the town of 2,000 souls had exactly 3 claims to fame: the cleanest air in the continental United States, a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and Rocky Mountain Gun & Sport, where Chloe Martinez had spent the last 8 years fixing rifles with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. To the locals, Chloe was just another transplant from somewhere else, which in Montana meant anywhere. That had more than one stoplight. She rented a small cabin 15 minutes outside town, drove a pickup truck that had seen better decades, and kept to herself with the determined efficiency of someone who had learned that other people's business usually led to trouble. When pressed for details about her past, she'd mention something vague about military service and changing the subject, so smoothly that people forgot what they'd asked. The gun shop itself was a testament to organized obsession. Every tool had its place, every weapon was cataloged and maintained to factory specifications, and the custom work that came out of Chloe's hands was sought after by hunters and collectors. From across the Northwest, she specialized in long-range rifles, the kind that required mathematical precision and an understanding of ballistics that most people associated with rocket science rather than hunting deer. What the customers didn't know was that every morning before opening the shop, Chloe performed a routine that would have raised questions if anyone had witnessed it. She would stand at the back window of the shop, coffee in hand, and study the mountain ranges that stretched to the horizon. Her eyes would track across the peaks and valleys with the mechanical precision of someone calculating distances, wind patterns, and firing solutions. It was an automatic process, as natural as breathing and as revealing as a signature. The mountains called to something deep in her memory, something that connected to muscle memory and skills that had nothing to do with fixing hunting rifles for weekend warriors. When the wind was right and the light hit the peaks just so, she could almost feel the weight of a rifle in her hands, hear the whispered calculations of windage and elevation, remember the absolute stillness that came in the seconds before squeezing. a trigger at distances that defied belief. But those were memories from another life, another person entirely. Chloe Martinez was a gunsmith who lived quietly and bothered no one. The woman who had once held records for confirmed kills at ranges that officially didn't exist was buried so deep that sometimes Chloe almost believed she had never existed at all. The shop drew a steady clientele of hunters, collectors, and the occasional law enforcement officer needing specialized work. Chloe had developed a reputation for being able to improve the accuracy of virtually any rifle, often in ways that seemed almost magical to her customers. A weapon that had been shooting 3-inch groups at 100 yards would leave her bench capable of putting bullets through the same hole. She never explained her methods in detail, just handed over improved weapons with the quiet satisfaction of someone who understood the physics of precision in ways that couldn't be taught from books. Sheriff Tom Baldwin was one of her regular customers, a decent man who had served 2 tours in Iraq before coming home to protect the people of Millfield County. He brought his department's rifles to Chloe for maintenance and had developed enough respect for her skills to stop asking questions about her background. There was something in her manner, a way she handled weapons that spoke of training far beyond civilian experience. But Tom had learned that some stories were meant to stay buried. "You know," Tom had said one afternoon while picking up his departments, "rifles, we could use someone with your skills for our tactical team. County's been talking about establishing a sniper program." Chloe had continued cleaning the rifle in her hands without looking up. "I fix things, Sheriff. I don't break them." It was the kind of response that ended conversations, delivered with just enough finality to make it clear that certain doors were permanently closed. Tom had nodded and changed the subject to safer topics like weather and hunting seasons, but he'd filed away the interaction as another piece of evidence that Chloe Martinez was considerably more than she appeared to be. The truth was that Chloe had rebuilt her entire existence around the principle of invisibility. She paid her taxes, maintained her business license, and participated in community life, just enough to avoid standing out. She volunteered for the annual charity auction, donated anonymously to local causes, and had even joined the volunteer fire department, where her calm under pressure and ability to function in crisis situations had earned quiet respect without raising questions. But invisibility was a carefully maintained illusion that required constant attention to detail. She never used her real name on any documents that might be digitally searchable. She paid for everything in cash when possible, and maintained multiple layers of financial separation from her previous identity. Her cabin was registered to a trust that couldn't be easily traced back to her, and she'd chosen Millfield specifically because it was the kind of place where people minded their own business and respected others who did the same. The mountains themselves were part of her security system. The terrain around Millfield was rough enough to discourage casual visitors and complex enough to provide multiple escape routes for someone who understood how to move through wilderness undetected. She'd spent months after arriving learning every trail, every ridgeline, every hidden valley that could provide concealment or tactical advantage. It was preparation born from paranoia, but also from hard-earned experience about what happened to people who let their guard down in a world where secrets had prices and some knowledge was worth killing for. Her cabin reflected the same careful planning. From the outside, it looked like any other mountain retreat: weathered wood, metal roof, practical rather than pretty. But Chloe had made modifications that weren't visible to casual observers. The windows were bulletproof glass disguised to look standard, the doors were reinforced with steel cores, and the basement contained supplies and equipment that had nothing to do with gunsmithing and everything to do with survival. Most importantly, hidden in a concealed room behind her workshop, was the rifle that had defined her previous life. It was a custom weapon that officially didn't exist, built to specifications that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in long-range precision shooting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, Subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She maintained it with religious dedication, despite never intending to use it again, the same way some people kept photographs of lost loved ones. It was a connection to a past that she'd tried to leave buried, but couldn't quite abandon entirely. The weapon was a masterpiece of engineering and craftsmanship, designed for shots that required calculating the rotation of the Earth and the effect of atmospheric pressure at altitudes where most aircraft couldn't function. It had been her companion through operations that had never been officially acknowledged, in places that didn't appear on any maps, against targets that had posed threats to national security in ways that couldn't be solved through conventional military means. Every component had been selected and modified for maximum accuracy at extreme range. The barrel was custom-made from steel that had been stress-relieved through processes that took months to complete. The action was machined to tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of an inch. The scope was military-grade optical technology that could resolve targets at distances where atmospheric distortion became a major factor. Even the ammunition was hand-loaded using techniques that treated each cartridge like a precision instrument, rather than a mass-produced commodity. But for 8 years, that rifle had remained hidden and unused, a reminder of capabilities that Chloe had deliberately chosen to abandon. She'd built a new life based on the principle that some skills were too dangerous to practice and some knowledge was too valuable to risk exposing. The woman who had once been considered one of the most effective long-range specialists in military history had become a small-town gunsmith who fixed deer rifles and minded her own business. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were nights when muscle memory would wake her from sleep, her hands automatically reaching for weapons that weren't there, her mind calculating firing solutions for threats that existed only in dreams. There were mornings when the mountains called to something primitive in her brain, triggering memories of missions where success was measured in millimeters and failure meant that good people died in distant places. But she'd disciplined herself to suppress those instincts, to channel her need for precision into civilian pursuits that satisfied her perfectionist nature without endangering her carefully constructed anonymity. Gunsmithing had provided the perfect cover. It utilized her technical skills, satisfied her need to work with precision instruments, and gave her a legitimate reason to possess extensive knowledge about ballistics and weapon systems. The shop had become her sanctuary, a place where she could be useful without being dangerous, where her expertise could help hunters feed their families and sports shooters pursue their hobbies without anyone questioning why. She understood the physics of long-range shooting better than most college professors. It was honest work that provided a comfortable living while allowing her to remain invisible in a world where certain agencies might still be interested in her whereabouts. She'd convinced herself that this quiet life was enough, that she'd successfully buried the past deep enough to stay buried. She'd stopped checking news reports for references to operations she might have been involved in, stopped monitoring communication channels that had once connected her to a world of classified missions and official secrets. She'd learned to sleep through the night without startling awake at unexpected sounds, learned to walk through crowds without automatically cataloging threats and escape routes. But old habits died hard, and some instincts ran too deep to ever completely disappear. She still chose seats in restaurants that provided clear views of all entrances. She still varied her daily routines enough to avoid predictable patterns. She still maintained physical conditioning that had nothing to do with the demands of gunsmithing and everything to do with staying ready for threats that logic said would never materialize. The irony wasn't lost on her that hiding from her past had required using many of the same skills that had made her dangerous in the first place. Operational security, situational awareness, and the ability to create and maintain false identities were all part of the same skill set that had once made her one of the military's most valuable assets. She'd simply redirected those capabilities toward disappearing rather than eliminating targets. but the underlying competencies remain sharp through constant, unconscious practice. And so Chloe Martinez lived her carefully constructed life in the mountains of Montana, fixing rifles for people who would never know that the quiet woman adjusting their scopes had once been capable of eliminating targets at distances that seemed impossible to anyone who hadn't spent years perfecting the art of extreme-range precision shooting. She was content, or at least had convinced herself that contentment was close enough to happiness to make the sacrifice worthwhile. Until the morning when Marcus Reed walked into her shop carrying questions that could unravel everything she'd built, and a challenge that would force her to choose between the safety of invisibility and the dangerous truth of who she really was. Marcus Reed had the patience of a predator and the instincts of someone who had survived situations where lesser men became statistics. He didn't push Chloe for an immediate answer to his challenge. Instead, he spent the next 3 days becoming a fixture around Millfield, drinking coffee at Betty's Diner, asking casual questions about the local gunsmith, and observing her routines with the systematic thoroughness of a professional hunter. What he discovered only confirmed his suspicions. Chloe Martinez moved through her daily life with a level of situational awareness that no civilian possessed naturally. She varied her routes to and from the shop, never sat with her back to open spaces, and had positioned mirrors throughout her workspace that provided clear views of all approaches to the building. When customers handled weapons in her presence, her eyes automatically tracked muzzle direction and finger placement with the reflexive caution of someone who had learned that carelessness with firearms could be fatal. More telling were the subtle signs that spoke to training far beyond civilian marksmanship. The way she estimated distances by eye, her unconscious calculation of wind direction and strength, the manner in which she handled every rifle as if she understood its capabilities better than its manufacturer. These weren't skills that came from reading manuals or weekend shooting courses. They were the hard-won competencies of someone who had put bullets exactly where they needed to go when lives depended on absolute precision. On Thursday morning, Marcus returned to the shop carrying a folder that contained information Chloe had hoped would never surface again. He waited until the last customer left, then turned the sign to closed and locked the door behind him with movements that suggested this conversation wouldn't be interrupted. "Elena Vasquez," he said quietly, placing a photograph on the counter. "Staff Sergeant, Army Special Operations. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. Specialist in extreme long-range interdiction. Officially killed in action during a classified operation 6 years ago." Chloe continued cleaning the rifle in her hands, but Marcus noticed that her movements had become more deliberate, more controlled. "Never heard of her." "Interesting," Marcus continued, producing more photographs. "Because Elena Vasquez held the record for confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. She was part of a program so classified that most of the people who worked with her didn't know her real name. They just called her Ghost." The cleaning rod in Chloe's hands paused for the briefest moment before resuming its steady rhythm. Sounds like military fiction. Marcus spread out tactical photographs showing impossible shots through urban environments and mountain terrain. "These are mission reports. Each one documents targets eliminated at ranges that officially aren't possible. With current technology, the ballistic calculations alone required advanced mathematics and an understanding of atmospheric physics that most university professors couldn't grasp." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But here's what made Ghost truly special. She didn't just make impossible shots. She made them in conditions that would have broken lesser snipers. Sandstorms, high winds, moving targets at extreme elevation. The kind of precision that required not just technical skill, but an almost supernatural understanding of how bullets behave in flight." Chloe set down the rifle and met his gaze directly for the first time since he'd entered the shop. "What do you want?" "Derek Thompson is going to die if I don't find Ghost," Marcus said simply. And Derek Thompson saved my life in Kandahar when I was too green to know better. The name hit Chloe like a physical blow. Derek had been her spotter, her partner, her closest friend during the years when they had operated in the gray spaces between official military action and plausible deniability. He was the one person who had known Elena Vasquez well enough to see through any identity she might construct, which was exactly why she had never tried to contact him after her official death. Derek Thompson died in the same operation that killed Elena Vasquez, she said carefully. Marcus shook his head. Derek survived, but barely. Spent 2 years in military hospitals, another year in rehabilitation. When he was finally cleared for duty, they transferred him to a training command in Colorado. He's been working with a special program, teaching advanced marksmanship to special operations candidates. He produced a tablet showing recent satellite imagery of a remote facility nestled in the Colorado Rockies. 3 days ago, Derek's training exercise went wrong. His team was conducting a live fire exercise in mountain terrain when they were attacked by unknown hostiles. Derek and 2 students are pinned down in a canyon with limited ammunition and no radio contact. The weather window for conventional rescue is closing fast. Chloe studied the tactical situation displayed on the screen. The canyon was a natural kill box, narrow enough that any rescue helicopter would be vulnerable to ground fire, with terrain too rough for vehicle access. The only high ground that offered adequate fields of fire for sniper support was a series of peaks that ranged from 4,000 to 6,000 meters from the target area. "Send someone else," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We tried. 3 different sniper teams refused the mission. Too far, too difficult, too many variables. The military's official position is that shots at those ranges are technically impossible under field conditions." Marcus smiled grimly. "But we both know that's not true, don't we?" He produced one final photograph, this one showing Derek Thompson in recent years. The face was older, marked by scars and the weight of accumulated stress, but the eyes were the same. They still held the steady calm of someone who had learned to function under pressure that would break most people. "Derek specifically requested Ghost if anything ever went wrong," Marcus continued. "Said she was the only sniper alive who could make shots that physics said were impossible. And more importantly, the only one crazy enough to try." Chloe walked to the window, staring out at the mountains that had provided her sanctuary for 8 years. In the distance, she could see the peaks that Derek was trapped among, hundreds of miles away, but connected by the same unforgiving terrain that had shaped both their lives. "How did you find me?" she asked finally. "Derek never stopped tracking your movements. He figured out that Elena Vasquez couldn't just disappear without leaving traces, and he had contacts in places where official records could be quietly accessed. When Marcus Reed needed a miracle sniper, Derek gave him coordinates and a name. Said to look for the woman who understood rifles better than their manufacturers and could disappear into mountain communities without leaving footprints." Marcus gathered his photographs and documents, but left the tablet showing the tactical situation. "We'll be at the county airfield in 2 hours. Helicopter transport to the staging area, then whatever support you need to make the shot. Your choice, but if you don't come, Derek Thompson becomes another casualty of an operation that officially never happened." After Marcus left, Chloe stood alone in her shop surrounded by the tools and weapons that had defined her new life. On the tablet screen, the tactical map showed Derek's position with clinical precision, grid coordinates that reduced a human life to mathematics, elevation markers that translated desperation into ballistic calculations. She locked the shop and drove to her cabin, moving through the afternoon routine that had anchored her civilian existence for 8 years. But everything felt different now, as if the careful order she had imposed on her life was unraveling with each passing minute. In the hidden room behind her workshop, the custom rifle waited in its climate-controlled case, maintained to perfect condition despite years of deliberate neglect. Chloe opened the case and lifted the weapon, feeling its familiar weight and balance. It fit her hands like it had been grown rather than manufactured. Every surface and control positioned exactly where muscle memory expected to find it. The rifle represented capabilities that she had tried to abandon, but also connections to people who had trusted her with their lives when conventional solutions weren't sufficient. The encrypted satellite phone that she hadn't used in 6 years was hidden behind a false panel in her bedroom wall. It took 3 attempts to remember the activation sequence, but when the device finally connected to secure communication satellites, the display showed 17 missed messages from Derek Thompson spanning the past year. The messages were brief, coded in language that would mean nothing to casual observers, but everything to someone who had shared years of classified operations. Derek had been tracking unusual activity in military training programs, noting patterns. That suggested someone was using special operations resources for purposes that weren't entirely legitimate. More troubling, several former snipers from their program had died in accidents or disappeared under circumstances that raised questions among people who understood how to read between lines. In official reports, the final message was time-stamped. 18 hours ago, compromise suspected, exercise was strap. Need ghost, grid coordinates follow, time critical. Chloe closed her eyes and felt the weight of old promises and deeper loyalties that she had tried to bury but never quite abandoned. Derek had saved her life more times than she could count, providing targeting information and covering fire that had made impossible shots merely difficult. More than that, he was the one person who had known Elena Vasquez well enough to see past the operational necessities to the woman beneath the legend. She began changing into clothing she hadn't worn in years, tactical pants with reinforced knees, a shirt designed to wick moisture while providing freedom of movement, boots that could handle rough terrain for extended periods. Each piece of equipment felt strange at first, then increasingly familiar as muscle memory reasserted itself. The rifle case was designed for transport under extreme conditions, waterproof and shock-resistant enough to survive helicopter crashes and parachute drops. Inside, nestled in custom foam, were the components that had once made her the most effective long-range specialist in military history, the rifle itself, a scope that cost more than most cars, and ammunition that had been hand-loaded to specifications that treated each cartridge like a precision instrument. As she secured the case, Chloe caught her reflection in the workshop window. The woman looking back wasn't the quiet gunsmith who had lived peacefully in Millfield for 8 years. She was Elena Vasquez, calcined ghost, and she had work to do. The drive to the county airfield took 20 minutes through mountain roads that she had traveled thousands of times as a civilian. But tonight, she was calculating elevation changes and wind patterns, automatically noting terrain features that could provide concealment or firing positions. The transformation from Chloe Martinez to Elena Vasquez was happening at a cellular level. Years of suppressed training and instinct reasserting themselves with frightening efficiency. Marcus Reed was waiting beside a military helicopter that bore no official markings, its engines already spooling up for immediate departure. He nodded approvingly as she approached carrying the rifle case and a small pack of personal equipment. "Wasn't sure you'd come," he said over the rotor noise. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. "Derek Thompson doesn't leave people behind. Neither do I." As the helicopter lifted off into the mountain darkness, Elena felt the familiar rush of operations that existed outside normal military channels. She was no longer hiding from her past. She was embracing it with the focused intensity of someone who understood that some missions couldn't be accomplished by people who followed conventional rules. The flight to Colorado would take 3 hours, giving her time to study the tactical situation and prepare for shots that would test the absolute limits of what was possible in long-range precision shooting. But for the first time in 8 years, Elena Vasquez felt completely alive. The staging area was abandoned mining operation 40 miles from Derek's last known position, chosen for its combination of altitude, concealment, and access to high ground that offered potential firing. Positions. Elena studied the terrain maps while Marcus briefed her on the tactical situation with the clinical precision of someone who understood that incomplete information could be fatal. Derek's team was conducting advanced marksmanship training when they were ambushed by approximately 12 hostiles with automatic weapons and possibly anti-aircraft missiles. Marcus explained, pointing to satellite imagery that showed the canyon where Derek was trapped. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, suggesting advanced knowledge of the exercise schedule and planned positions. Elena examined the topographical data with the systematic thoroughness that had kept her alive through dozens of impossible missions. The canyon was a textbook kill zone, narrow enough that movement was channeled into predictable patterns, with high walls that limited escape routes while providing excellent cover for attackers. Any conventional rescue attempt would result in additional casualties without improving Derek's situation. "Distance to target?" she asked, though she was already calculating firing solutions in her head. "Minimum range is 4,200 meters to the canyon floor, extending to nearly 6,000 meters depending on which firing position you choose," Marcus replied. "Wind conditions are variable due to the mountain terrain and weather. Reports show a storm system moving in within the next 8 hours. Elena nodded, absorbing information that would have overwhelmed most military snipers. At ranges exceeding 4,000 meters, traditional ballistic calculations became approximations. At best, factors like the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, temperature variations at different altitudes, and atmospheric pressure changes could deflect bullets by several meters even with perfect aim. "What about hostile capabilities?" she asked, studying defensive positions that could threaten her proposed firing locations. "Unknown, but they were prepared for the ambush and have maintained positions for 3 days without being dislodged by conventional military response," Marcus said. Grimly, "Intelligence suggests possible foreign training and equipment, which means they might have counter-sniper capabilities." Elena felt the familiar weight of operational planning settling over her like an old coat. Every variable had to be considered, every contingency planned for, because at extreme range, there were no second chances. A missed shot wouldn't just fail to neutralize the target. It would reveal her position to enemies who might have the equipment and training to return fire effectively. She began assembling her rifle with movements that were automatic after years of practice. Each component was checked and verified before attachment, the scope mounted and calibrated to specifications that accounted for altitude, temperature, and atmospheric conditions that wouldn't be found in any manual. The ammunition was selected from cartridges that had been loaded to match the specific ballistic characteristics of this particular weapon system. "I need 3 hours of reconnaissance before engaging," Elena said, adjusting the scope's internal mechanisms with micro-movements that reflected years of experience. Terrain familiarization, wind pattern observation, target identification, and prioritization. Marcus consulted his watch. "Derek's team has been without resupply for 3 days. Time isn't working in our favor." "Dead snipers don't save anyone," Elena replied calmly. "I've waited 8 years to take a shot like this. I can wait 3 more hours to make sure it counts." The climb to her chosen firing position took 2 hours through terrain that would have challenged experienced mountaineers. Elena moved through the darkness with a combination of night vision technology and natural ability that came from years of operating in hostile environments. Behind her, Marcus followed with support equipment and communications gear, impressed despite himself by the woman's ability to navigate treacherous mountain terrain while carrying a rifle system that weighed nearly 40 pounds. The final firing position was a wind-scoured ledge 6,500 feet above sea level, offering clear fields of fire across the valley where Derek was trapped while providing enough concealment to avoid counter-detection. Elena established her position with the methodical care of someone who understood that every detail could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She deployed a portable weather station that would provide real-time data on wind speed, direction, temperature, and barometric pressure. A laser rangefinder gave precise distances to multiple reference points throughout the target area. Most importantly, she began the patient process of observing conditions and calculating firing solutions for shots that would challenge the theoretical limits of rifle accuracy. Through her scope, Elena could see the canyon where Derek's team was trapped. Muzzle flashes from hostile positions revealed at least 8 separate firing points, with additional movement suggesting reserves or rotating guards. Derek's position was marked by disciplined return fire that spoke to professional training and careful ammunition conservation. Range to primary target area, 4,320 meters, Elena murmured into her headset, beginning the calculations that would determine whether Derek Thompson lived or died. Wind consistent from the northwest at 12 knots, gusting to 18. Temperature differential between firing position and target area approximately 35 degrees Fahrenheit. She adjusted her scope settings to compensate for atmospheric conditions that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. At this range, she wasn't just aiming at targets. She was predicting where targets would be by the time her bullets completed their 6-second flight through space that included significant vertical and horizontal deflection. First target acquired, Elena reported, settling into the shooting position that had become as natural as breathing during her years of active service. Hostile sniper position, elevated above Derek's location. Range 4,512 meters. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving carefully between rocks, someone with enough training to avoid skylining themselves against the horizon, but not enough experience to recognize that they were visible to observation. Technology that operated beyond visual range. This wasn't a local insurgent or opportunistic criminal. This was someone with military training and equipment. Elena controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate and entering the meditative state that preceded extreme range shots. Her finger found the trigger with familiar comfort, applying pressure with the precise control that came from years of practice. At this distance, the margin of error was measured in fractions of inches, and success required not just technical skill, but an almost mystical understanding of how physics and probability intersected in the moment when powder ignited and physics took over. The shot felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's recoil was absorbed by her body position and equipment, allowing her to maintain target observation through the scope. For 6 long seconds, she watched the target area while her bullet traveled through space at velocities that created their own temporary weather patterns. The hostile sniper simply disappeared, there one moment and gone the next, eliminated by a bullet that had traveled nearly 3 miles through mountain air to arrive exactly where Elena had calculated it would be needed. No drama, no visible impact, just the immediate cessation of movement that indicated a successful engagement. Target down, Elena reported, already shifting to acquire the next threat. Derek's team should have movement capability to the east now. But even as she lined up her second shot, Elena was thinking beyond the immediate tactical situation. Someone had ambushed Derek's training exercise with advanced knowledge of his schedule and positions. Someone had deployed trained fighters with military equipment to a remote canyon where official rescue operations would be difficult or impossible. This wasn't random violence. It was a deliberate attempt to eliminate someone whose knowledge or abilities posed a threat to parties unknown. The second shot was more complex, requiring Elena to engage a target that was partially concealed behind natural cover while accounting for wind patterns that were different at the target's elevation. She waited for nearly 10 minutes, observing movement patterns and calculating the precise moment when the target would be exposed long enough for her bullet to arrive. When the opportunity came, Elena was ready. The second hostile fighter was eliminated with the same clinical precision as the first, creating a gap in the enemy's defensive perimeter that Derek's team could exploit for movement towards safer positions. Multiple targets moving, Marcus reported, watching the tactical situation develop through his own observation equipment. Derek's team is advancing, but they're taking fire from at least 3 positions we haven't identified yet. Elena was already acquiring her third target, a machine gun position that was suppressing Derek's movement with disciplined bursts of automatic fire. This shot would be the most challenging yet, requiring her to hit a target that was not only at extreme range, but also positioned to minimize exposure to return fire. She waited with the infinite patience of a true predator, knowing that hurrying would only decrease her chances of success. At ranges exceeding 4,000 meters, every shot had to count because the time required for target reacquisition meant that missed opportunities might not present themselves again. The machine gun position revealed itself through muzzle flash and movement, giving Elena the brief window she needed to deliver precise fire that would eliminate the threat without endangering Derek's team. The shot required calculation not just of ballistic trajectory, but of timing that would place her bullet in exactly the right location to intercept her target during a moment of vulnerability. When the machine gun suddenly ceased firing, Elena knew that Derek Thompson had 3 fewer enemies between himself and safety. But she also knew that this engagement was only the beginning of something larger and more dangerous than a simple rescue operation. Derek's team is moving toward the extraction point, Marcus reported. But we're seeing additional movement that suggests reinforcements arriving. Elena continued to provide precision fire support, eliminating threats with shots that defied conventional understanding of what was possible in long-range engagement. Each success built on the previous one, creating conditions that allowed Derek's team to move from a hopeless situation toward potential safety. But with each shot, Elena was also revealing her presence to enemies who might have the capability to track her position and respond with counterfire. The rescue operation was becoming a race between her ability to eliminate threats and their ability to locate and neutralize her before Derek could reach safety. As dawn approached, Elena realized that saving Derek Thompson was only the first step in a much larger and more dangerous game. Someone had deliberately targeted her former spotter, which meant someone knew that Elena Vasquez was still alive and still capable of influencing events that powerful people preferred to control. The war for Derek's survival was about to become a war for the truth about why Ghost Squadron snipers were being systematically eliminated by people who preferred their secrets to remain buried. The helicopter extraction went flawlessly, with Derek Thompson and his 2 surviving students pulled from the canyon, just as reinforcements arrived to strengthen the hostile positions. Elena provided overwatch during the extraction, eliminating 3 additional targets who attempted to engage the rescue aircraft with shoulder-fired missiles that would have been devastating against unprotected helicopters. But as Derek was loaded onto the medical evacuation helicopter, Elena noticed something that sent cold realization crawling up her spine. The equipment that the hostiles had been using wasn't black market surplus or foreign military surplus. It was current generation American Special Operations equipment, the kind that required security clearances and official authorization to obtain. "We need to talk," Derek said weakly as medical personnel worked to stabilize his condition. 3 days without food or water, combined with a grazing bullet wound to his shoulder, had left him exhausted, but still mentally sharp enough to recognize the implications of what had happened. "Later," Elena replied, but Derek grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "This wasn't random," he whispered urgently. The exercise was compromised from the beginning. Someone with access to classified training schedules set us up for elimination. Elena felt the familiar chill that preceded the revelation of betrayal at institutional levels. Who knew about the exercise? Training Command, Pentagon oversight, and the private contractor who was evaluating our curriculum for potential expansion, Derek said before the medics sedated him for transport to a secure medical facility. The private contractor detail stuck in Elena's mind like a splinter. During her years in Ghost Squadron, she had seen how military privatization created opportunities for information to leak from official channels into less scrupulous hands. Contractors with security clearances could access classified information without the same level of accountability that governed military personnel. Marcus Reed joined her at the helicopter landing zone where they were debriefed by intelligence specialists who asked careful questions about the engagement while avoiding any topics that might reveal the true scope of what had happened. Elena recognized the pattern from her previous life: compartmentalized information, need-to-know restrictions, and careful omission of details that might embarrass senior officials. "Something's wrong with this whole operation," she told Marcus, as they drove away from the official debriefing. Derek's team was set up by someone with access to classified planning information, and the hostiles had equipment that doesn't appear on any black market. Marcus nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. The original request for your assistance came through channels that shouldn't have known about Derek's situation unless someone was monitoring military communications in real time." Elena felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to assemble. In her mind, who requested Ghost specifically? "Colonel Vincent Hayes, Pentagon Special Operations Oversight," Marcus replied. "He said Derek Thompson had provided your identity as the only sniper capable of making the shots necessary for a successful rescue." The name Vincent Hayes triggered memories that Elena had tried to suppress for 8 years. Hayes had been the Pentagon liaison during some of Ghost Squadron's most sensitive operations, the man who provided political authorization for missions that operated outside normal military command structures. He had also been the last person to see Elena Vasquez before her official death in Afghanistan. Hayes was supposed to be at the forward operating base when our last mission went wrong, Elena said slowly, remembering details that she had deliberately avoided thinking about for years. "But he left on a helicopter 20 minutes before the attack that supposedly killed me." Marcus parked the vehicle at a roadside overlook that provided clear views of the surrounding terrain while allowing them to speak privately. "Tell me about that operation." Elena stared across the valley where Derek had nearly died, her mind traveling back to the mission that had ended Elena Vasquez's official existence and created the need for Chloe Martinez to disappear into civilian life. "We were providing overwatch for a joint special forces and CIA operation targeting a high-value terrorist leader. Intelligence indicated that the target would be at a specific compound at a specific time, with limited security and clear fields of fire for long-range engagement." She paused, remembering details that had seemed routine at the time but looked different in hindsight. Hayes personally briefed Derek and me on the mission parameters. He emphasized the importance of eliminating the target cleanly, with no witnesses and no evidence that American forces had been involved. "What went wrong?" "Everything," Elena replied bitterly. "The target wasn't at the compound. Instead, we found a meeting of local tribal leaders who were negotiating a peace agreement that would have reduced American military presence in the region. The intelligence was fabricated, and we were being set up to assassinate people whose deaths would justify continued military operations." Marcus felt a chill as the implications became clear. Someone wanted to sabotage peace negotiations. "Derek figured it out just before I was supposed to take the shot," Elena continued. "We tried to abort the mission, but Hayes ordered us to proceed with engagement. When we refused, he declared us compromised and called in an airstrike on our position. The official records showed Elena Vasquez killed in action during a classified operation, with Derek Thompson severely wounded, but eventually recovered. In reality, Elena had used demolitions training to fake her own death, while Derek provided cover for her escape. They had both understood that questioning orders from Colonel Hayes was equivalent to signing their own death warrants. "So you've been hiding from Hayes for 8 years, Marcus concluded. "Until 3 days ago, when he used Derek as bait to draw me out of hiding," Elena replied. "Hayes knew that I would respond to a request for help from Derek, and he probably counted on me revealing my capabilities during the rescue operation." Marcus checked his secure communication device and found a message that confirmed Elena's worst fears. "Orders just came down from Pentagon Special Operations. You're to report for immediate debriefing regarding your unauthorized participation in a classified rescue operation." Elena smiled grimly. "Vincent Hayes wants to finish what he started 8 years ago." They drove to a truck stop outside Denver, where Elena had arranged to meet contacts who could provide transportation and equipment that wouldn't appear in official databases. Marcus watched with professional admiration as Elena transformed herself from a mountain gunsmith into a special operations asset with access to resources that officially didn't exist. "I'm going off the grid," Elena told him. "Hayes will try to arrange an accident during the debriefing, something that eliminates me permanently while maintaining plausible deniability." "What about Derek?" "Derek is safe as long as he's in official medical care with witnesses," Elena replied. "But Hayes won't stop with just eliminating me. He'll go after anyone who knows about the operations he's been covering up for years." Elena's contacts provided her with a vehicle, communications equipment, and intelligence that revealed the scope of Vincent Hayes' activities since their last encounter. Hayes had used his position in Pentagon oversight to monitor and manipulate special operations for personal and political benefit, arranging for the elimination of operators who possessed inconvenient knowledge about unauthorized missions. He's been systematically removing witnesses to operations that could embarrass current and former administrations, Elena said, reviewing classified documents that detailed Hayes' network of contractors, political connections, and financial interests. "Derek and I weren't the only ones who figured out that some missions were designed to serve private interests rather than national security." Marcus studied photographs showing Hayes with defense contractors, political officials, and foreign intelligence representatives. This goes beyond simple corruption. He's been selling operational intelligence and using military assets for private profit. Elena nodded, understanding that Hayes represented something far more dangerous than individual corruption. He was part of a system that had learned to monetize military power while eliminating anyone who threatened to expose the mechanism. "Tomorrow, Hayes will arrange for me to have an accident during debriefing. Tonight, I'm going to make sure that Vincent Hayes doesn't have any more accidents to arrange." The hunt for Colonel Vincent Hayes would require Elena to use every skill she had developed during her years in Ghost Squadron, but this time the target wouldn't be foreign terrorists or enemy combatants. This time she would be hunting someone who understood her capabilities and had spent years preparing countermeasures against exactly the kind of precision operation she was planning. The final confrontation between Ghost and her former commander would determine whether the truth about Ghost Squadron's manipulation would remain buried, or whether the people responsible for betraying American special operations would finally face justice for their crimes against the soldiers they had sworn to protect. Colonel Vincent Hayes had built his career on the principle that information was power, and that power was most effective when exercised from positions where accountability was minimal. His office in the Pentagon Special Operations Wing was a testament to carefully cultivated connections, photographs with senators, generals, and defense contractors who had profited from his ability to direct military resources toward outcomes that served multiple interests simultaneously. But Hayes had made a fundamental miscalculation about Elena Vasquez. He had assumed that 8 years of civilian life would have dulled her operational instincts and reduced her to the level of skill that could be managed through conventional security measures. Instead, Elena had spent those years perfecting abilities that made her even more dangerous than the legendary ghost who had once terrorized enemies at impossible ranges. Elena's infiltration of the Pentagon began 3 days before her scheduled debriefing, using credentials and access protocols that she had acquired through networks that existed in the spaces between official agencies. She moved through one of the world's most secure facilities with the patient confidence of someone who understood that the best place to hide was often in plain sight among people who were too busy to question credentials that appeared legitimate. Her reconnaissance of Hayes's operations revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond individual corruption. Hayes had been coordinating with defense contractors to create artificial demand for military services by ensuring that peaceful solutions to international conflicts were sabotaged through targeted operations that escalated tensions rather than resolving them. Ghost Squadron's precision capabilities had been weaponized not against America's enemies, but against America's potential for peace. The evidence Elena gathered documented Hayes's involvement in assassination operations designed to eliminate foreign leaders who were negotiating reductions in American military presence, arms deals arranged through the deliberate creation of regional instabilities, and the systematic murder of American special operations personnel who had discovered the true nature of missions they had been ordered to conduct. Derek Thompson's ambush had been only the latest in a series of operations designed to eliminate witnesses to Hayes's monetization of military power. But Hayes had underestimated both Derek's survival instincts and Elena's willingness to emerge from hiding to protect people who had earned her loyalty through shared service in legitimate military operations. On Thursday morning, Elena positioned herself in the Pentagon's central courtyard with a view of Hayes's office windows and communication intercept equipment that allowed her to monitor his security preparations. She watched through a scope as Hayes met with contractors, Pentagon officials, and private security personnel who were clearly planning something more lethal than a routine debriefing. Ghost surveillance indicates hostile preparation for permanent solution. Elena transmitted to Marcus Reed, who was monitoring from a secure location outside Washington. Recommend immediate implementation of exposure protocol. Marcus activated communication networks that simultaneously delivered Elena's evidence to investigative journalists, congressional oversight committees, and FBI internal security divisions. Within minutes, the story of Colonel Vincent Hayes's betrayal of American special operations was spreading through channels that Hayes couldn't control or suppress. Hayes's response was immediate and predictable. Rather than attempting to deny the allegations, he accelerated plans for Elena's elimination while ordering the activation of assets positioned to neutralize Derek Thompson and Marcus Reed before they could provide additional testimony about Ghost Squadron's manipulation. But Elena had anticipated Hayes's reaction and prepared countermeasures that reflected 8 years of thinking about exactly this scenario. She had positioned herself not just to eliminate Hayes, but to do so in a manner that would create maximum exposure for his criminal network while providing undeniable evidence of his guilt. The shot that ended Colonel Vincent Hayes's life came from a distance of nearly 2,000 meters, fired from a position that surveillance cameras and witnesses would clearly document as self-defense against an armed conspiracy to commit murder. Elena's bullet arrived at precisely the moment when Hayes was giving orders for her assassination to contractors who were recording their conversation for financial documentation purposes. Hayes died at his office window, killed by a precision shot that demonstrated capabilities that only Ghost Squadron training could have provided, while security cameras recorded his final conversation with defense contractors who were discussing payment schedules for eliminating American military personnel who posed threats to their operations. The aftermath of Hayes's death created a cascade of investigations that dismantled the network of corruption he had spent years constructing. Defense contractors lost security clearances, Pentagon officials faced criminal charges, and congressional oversight committees implemented new accountability measures designed to prevent the privatization of military power for personal profit. Derek Thompson recovered from his injuries and testified before congressional committees about the systematic manipulation of special operations for purposes that violated both military ethics and federal law. His testimony, combined with Elena's evidence and Marcus Reed's documentation of the rescue operation, provided investigators with a comprehensive picture of how military power had been monetized at the expense of both American service members and global stability. But the most significant outcome was the establishment of new oversight protocols designed to prevent the kind of abuse that Hayes had perpetrated for years. Ghost Squadron's legacy was transformed from a classified program shrouded in secrecy to a symbol of the need for accountability in military operations that operated outside normal command structures. Elena Vasquez officially remained dead, but Chloe Martinez returned to Millfield, Montana with a renewed sense of purpose that extended beyond fixing hunting rifles for weekend sportsmen. She established a discreet network that monitored military training programs for signs of corruption or abuse, providing early warning systems for special operations personnel who might be targeted for elimination by people who preferred their secrets to remain buried. The gun shop became a front for activities that served the interests of American service members who found themselves caught between legitimate orders and illegal directives. Elena used her technical skills and operational experience to provide support for military personnel who needed to disappear from official radar, while maintaining their ability to serve legitimate national security interests. 3 months after Hayes's death, Elena received a visit from Lieutenant Kate Robinson, a young Army sniper who had been recruited for a training program that bore suspicious similarities to the operations that had nearly killed Derek Thompson. Kate had been told that her exceptional marksmanship skills made her ideal for missions that required discretion and flexibility in following orders. "They say the program is classified beyond normal military oversight," Kate explained, studying Elena with the careful attention of someone who had learned to read between lines in official communications. "They say participants develop skills that make them valuable for operations that protect national security in ways that conventional military structures can't accommodate." Elena recognized the language from her own recruitment years earlier. The same carefully crafted phrases that made illegal activities sound like patriotic service. "What do you want from me?" "I want to know if there's another way to serve my country without becoming a tool for people who use military power for personal profit," Kate replied. Elena smiled and reached for the business card that connected young service members to resources that Hayes's network had never discovered. There's always another way, but it requires courage to walk away from everything you think you want. As Kate left with contact information that would help her disappear from the corrupted recruitment program, Elena felt the satisfaction that came from using her deadly skills for protection rather than elimination. The weight of the rifle felt like coming home after years of exile. Elena assembled her weapon system with movements that bypassed conscious thought, muscle memory guiding her hands through procedures that she had performed thousands of times. In conditions ranging from Arctic cold to desert heat, every component clicked into place with the satisfying precision of machinery, designed for absolute reliability when failure meant death. The scope mounted to the rail system with mechanical perfection, its internal mechanisms calibrated to specifications that accounted for atmospheric conditions that wouldn't be found in any civilian manual. Elena adjusted the parallax settings while running ballistic calculations in her head, accounting for altitude differential, temperature variance, and Coriolis effect that would influence bullet trajectory over the extreme distances she was preparing to engage. Marcus watched with professional fascination as Elena transformed from a small-town gunsmith into something far more dangerous. Her movements became economical and precise, eliminating unnecessary motion while maintaining the fluid efficiency of someone who had learned to function under stress that would paralyze most people. When she looked up from her preparations, her eyes held the focused calm of a predator that had identified its prey. Distance to Derek's position is confirmed at 4,320 meters, Elena said, consulting range cards that she had prepared during her reconnaissance phase. Wind is steady from the northwest at 14 knots, with thermal updrafts from the valley floor, creating variable conditions at intermediate ranges. She deployed a portable weather monitoring station that would provide real-time atmospheric data throughout the engagement. Professional snipers understood that environmental conditions could change rapidly in mountain terrain, and shots at extreme range required constant adjustment for factors that evolved minute by minute. Target area shows multiple hostile positions, arranged in overlapping fields of fire, Elena continued, studying the tactical situation through her scope. Professional deployment suggests military training and advanced knowledge of Derek's intended positions. Through the powerful optics, Elena could see muzzle flashes that indicated at least 8 separate firing positions, arranged to create interlocking zones of lethal coverage. Derek's team was trapped in a natural depression that provided minimal cover while exposing them to observed fire from elevated positions that commanded all potential escape routes. First target acquired, Elena reported, settling into a shooting position that distributed her body weight evenly while providing maximum stability for precision fire. Hostile sniper, elevated position approximately 40 meters above Derek's location. Range 4,512 meters. The target was barely visible even through military-grade optics, a shadow among rocks that revealed itself only through careful observation of movement patterns and the occasional glint of reflected sunlight from optical equipment. Elena began the patient process of calculating a firing solution that would place her bullet exactly where it needed to be after a flight time that would seem like an eternity. At ranges exceeding 4,000 meters, traditional marksmanship became applied physics. Elena had to account for gravitational drop that would pull her bullets several meters below the line of sight, wind drift that could deflect the projectile horizontally by similar distances, and the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation that influenced trajectory in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. She controlled her breathing with techniques that slowed her heart rate and steadied her nervous system, entering a meditative state that eliminated distractions while maintaining perfect focus on the task at hand. Her finger found the trigger. With practiced familiarity, applying pressure with the precise control that came from years of training under conditions where success meant survival and failure meant death. The shot broke cleanly, the rifle's recoil absorbed by Elena's position and equipment while she maintained visual contact with the target area through her scope. The bullet's flight to target would take approximately 6 seconds, during which atmospheric conditions, target movement, or calculation errors could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. Elena watched through her optics as the hostile sniper simply ceased to exist, there one moment and gone the next as her bullet arrived with devastating precision. No visible impact, no dramatic effects, just the immediate termination of a threat that had been suppressing Derek's movement options. Target eliminated, Elena transmitted to Marcus, already shifting her aim to acquire the next priority threat. Derek's team should have movement capability to the northeast now. But even as she lined up her second shot, Elena was analyzing patterns in the hostile deployment that suggested something far more sophisticated than opportunistic criminal activity. The firing positions were professionally selected. The equipment was current generation military hardware, and the tactical coordination indicated command and control capabilities that required significant resources and training. The second engagement required Elena to calculate a shot against a target that was using cover and concealment techniques that suggested advanced military training. She waited with infinite patience, observing movement patterns while accounting for wind variations that differed at the target's elevation and atmospheric pressure changes that occurred throughout the day. When the opportunity presented itself, Elena was ready. Her second bullet traveled through mountain air that was thin enough to affect ballistic performance while maintaining accuracy that placed the projectile within inches of her intended point of impact. Another hostile position fell silent, creating additional maneuver space for Derek's trapped team. Multiple targets repositioning, Marcus reported, monitoring the tactical situation through his own observation equipment. Derek's team is advancing, but they're receiving fire from positions we haven't identified yet. Elena continued providing precision fire support, eliminating threats with shots that demonstrated capabilities that existed at the very edge of what was possible in long-range engagement. Each successful hit required not just technical skill, but an almost supernatural understanding of how multiple variables combine to influence bullet trajectory over distances that most people couldn't accurately estimate by eye. Her third target was a machine gun position that was providing suppressive fire designed to pin Derek's team in place while other hostile elements maneuvered for better firing positions. Elena calculated the shot while accounting for the targets, partial concealment behind natural cover, and the need to time her bullet's arrival with a moment when the gunner would be exposed long enough for engagement. The machine gun fell silent with mechanical precision, its operator eliminated by a bullet that had traveled nearly 3 miles through mountain air to arrive exactly when and where Elena had calculated it would be needed. Derek's team immediately exploited the gap in hostile fire to advance toward more defensible positions. Helicopter approaching from the southeast, Marcus announced, tracking aircraft movement through binoculars. Medical evacuation for Derek's team, but they're taking ground fire from positions we can't identify. Elena shifted her focus to protecting the extraction, engaging targets that threatened the rescue helicopter with shoulder-fired missiles that would have been devastating against unarmored aircraft. Her shots eliminated 3 hostile fighters who were attempting to deploy anti-aircraft weapons, creating conditions that allowed the helicopter to complete its mission without taking casualties. As Derek Thompson was loaded onto the medical evacuation aircraft, Elena felt the satisfaction that came from using her lethal skills to preserve life rather than eliminate targets. But she also recognized that the engagement had revealed her presence to enemies who might have the capability to track her position and respond with counterfire. Extraction complete, Marcus reported as the helicopter disappeared into the distance, carrying Derek and his surviving students to medical facilities where they could receive proper treatment. But we're seeing additional movement that suggests reinforcements arriving. Elena began the careful process of withdrawing from her firing position, collecting equipment and eliminating traces of her presence, while maintaining awareness of potential threats that might attempt to intercept her. During movement to safety, the rescue operation had been successful, but it had also marked the beginning of something larger and more dangerous. During the helicopter flight back to their staging area, Elena studied intelligence reports that Marcus had received through secure communication channels. The equipment used by the hostile forces wasn't black market surplus or foreign military aid. It was current generation American special operations equipment, the kind that required security clearances and official authorization to obtain. Someone with access to classified supply chains equipped those fighters, Elena observed, recognizing weapons and communication systems that she had used during her own service in classified programs. This wasn't a random attack on Derek's training exercise. Marcus nodded grimly as he reviewed additional intelligence that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The exercise was compromised from the beginning. Someone with advanced knowledge of Derek's schedule and planned positions set up an ambush, using resources that aren't available to civilian criminal organizations. Elena felt the familiar chill that preceded revelations of betrayal at institutional levels. During her years in Ghost Squadron, she had learned that the most dangerous enemies were often those who operated from within trusted systems, using legitimate authority to accomplish illegitimate objectives. Who had access to Derek's training schedule? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Training Command, Pentagon Oversight, and the private contractor who was evaluating Derek's curriculum for potential expansion to other Special Operations Programs, Marcus replied, consulting classified documents that detailed the administrative structure surrounding Derek's assignment. The mention of private contractors triggered memories that Elena had spent 8 years trying to suppress. During Ghost Squadron's most sensitive operations, private contractors had often provided logistical support and intelligence analysis that supplemented official military capabilities. But privatization also created opportunities for information to leak from classified channels into hands that weren't bound by military codes of conduct or federal oversight. "I need to speak with Derek as soon as he's medically cleared," Elena said, understanding that the rescue operation had been only the first phase of a much larger and more complex situation. Someone wanted him dead, and they used resources that suggest involvement at very high levels of the military-industrial complex. The medical facility where Derek was being treated was a secure government installation that provided healthcare for personnel involved in classified operations. Elena's access was facilitated by credentials that Marcus had obtained through channels that operated in the gray areas between official agencies and private security organizations. Derek Thompson looked older than his years, marked by physical trauma and the psychological weight of realizing that his own government might have targeted him for elimination. But his eyes still held the steady intelligence that had made him one of the most effective spotters in special operations history. "They knew everything," Derek said when Elena entered his room, speaking in the low tones that indicated consciousness of potential surveillance. "Exercise schedule, planned positions, ammunition loadout, even the communication frequencies we were using for coordination with base command." Elena pulled a chair close to Derek's bed, positioning herself where their conversation couldn't be easily monitored by audio surveillance equipment. "Tell me about the contractor evaluation." "Blackstone Strategic Solutions," Derek replied, naming a private military company that Elena recognized from her previous life. "They've been expanding into training services, claiming they can provide more cost-effective instruction than traditional military programs." Elena felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to connect in disturbing ways. Blackstone Strategic Solutions had been involved in several operations during her time with Ghost Squadron, providing intelligence support and logistical services that supplemented official military capabilities. But she also remembered reports of security breaches and compromised operations that had been traced to contractor personnel who weren't subject to the same accountability measures that governed military service members. "Who was your primary contact at Blackstone?" Elena asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "Colonel Vincent Hayes," Derek said, confirming Elena's worst fears. "Recently retired from Pentagon Special Operations Oversight, now working as Blackstone's Director of Advanced Training Programs." The name Vincent Hayes sent cold realization flooding through Elena's consciousness. Hayes had been the Pentagon liaison during some of Ghost Squadron's most sensitive missions, the man who provided political authorization for operations that existed outside normal military command structures. He had also been the last person to see Elena Vasquez before her supposed death in Afghanistan. "Hayes was at our forward operating base the night our last mission went wrong," Elena said slowly, remembering details that she had deliberately avoided thinking about for 8 years. "He left on a helicopter 30 minutes before the attack that supposedly killed me." Derek's expression darkened as he absorbed the implications. "You think Hayes has been targeting Ghost Squadron personnel?" "I think Hayes has been cleaning house," Elena replied, Understanding that Derek's ambush was part of a systematic effort to eliminate witnesses to operations that powerful people preferred to keep buried. Someone who knows about our classified missions and has the resources to arrange professional assassinations disguised as training accidents. Elena spent the next hour debriefing Derek about the rescue operation while gathering intelligence about Hayes's current activities and organizational connections. The picture that emerged was of a man who had leveraged his Pentagon experience into a private sector position that provided access to classified information while operating outside the accountability measures that governed official military personnel. Hayes requested Ghost specifically for Derek's rescue, Marcus informed Elena during their secure communication session. He told me that Derek had identified you as the only sniper capable of making the shots necessary for a successful extraction. Elena felt the trap closing around her with mechanical precision. Hayes had used Derek as bait to draw her out of hiding, probably counting on her sense of loyalty to override her survival instincts. Now that she had revealed her capabilities and location, Hayes would move to eliminate her permanently while maintaining plausible deniability about her existence. "We need to disappear," Elena told Marcus. "Hayes will arrange for an accident during any official debriefing, something that eliminates me while providing cover for his activities." But even as Elena planned her immediate survival, she was also calculating how to expose Hayes's network before it could eliminate additional Ghost Squadron personnel. The rescue operation had demonstrated that she still possessed capabilities that could threaten Hayes's operations, but it had also revealed her presence to enemies who understood exactly how dangerous she could be. The war between Elena Vasquez and Vincent Hayes would determine whether the truth about Ghost Squadron's manipulation would remain buried, or whether the people responsible for betraying American Special Operations would finally face justice for their crimes against the soldiers they had sworn to protect. During the helicopter flight back to Montana, Elena established secure communication with contacts who could provide intelligence about Hayes's current operations and financial connections. What she discovered confirmed her worst suspicions about the scope of corruption that had infected Special Operations oversight. Hayes hadn't just been covering up individual crimes. He had been systematically monetizing military power through private contracts that served political and corporate interests rather than legitimate national security objectives. Ghost Squadron's precision capabilities had been weaponized not against America's enemies, but against America's potential for peaceful resolution of international conflicts. He's been arranging assassinations designed to sabotage peace negotiations, Elena told Marcus as they reviewed classified documents that detailed Hayes's involvement in operations spanning multiple continents. Every time diplomatic solutions threatened to reduce military involvement in profitable conflicts, Hayes provided precision targeting that eliminated key negotiators. The evidence painted a picture of systematic betrayal that extended far beyond individual corruption. Hayes had used his position to coordinate with defense contractors in creating artificial demand for military services by ensuring that peaceful solutions were sabotaged through targeted eliminations that escalated tensions rather than resolving them. Derek's training program was developing counter-sniper techniques that could have threatened Hayes's assassination capabilities, Marcus observed, studying tactical documents that revealed the true purpose of Derek's curriculum. If successful, it would have provided foreign governments with defenses against the kind of precision targeting that Hayes has been selling through Blackstone. Elena understood that Derek Thompson's near-death experience was part of a larger pattern of eliminating American military personnel who possessed knowledge or capabilities that threatened private interests masquerading as national security operations. Ghost Squadron hadn't just been disbanded. Its members had been systematically murdered to prevent exposure of how their skills had been exploited for private profit. The realization that her former commander had betrayed everything she had believed about military service created a cold rage that Elena channeled into operational planning. Vincent Hayes had spent years using Ghost Squadron's reputation to legitimize operations that served private interests while eliminating the people who could expose his crimes. Now Elena Vasquez was going to demonstrate exactly why Ghost Squadron snipers had earned their legendary status, but this time the target wouldn't be foreign terrorists or enemy combatants. This time, she would be hunting someone who understood her capabilities and had spent years preparing countermeasures against exactly the kind of precision operation she was planning. The hunt for Colonel Vincent Hayes would require Elena to use every skill she had developed during her years in classified programs, but it would also demand that she operate without the support systems and official authorization that had once made her missions possible. She would be a ghost hunting another ghost, with the stakes being not just her own survival, but the exposure of corruption that had betrayed American special operations at the highest levels. As Elena began planning what would likely be her final mission, she felt the weight of responsibility for every Ghost Squadron member who had died to protect Hayes' secrets. Derek Thompson had survived his assassination attempt, but others hadn't been so fortunate. It was time for someone to pay the price for betraying the soldiers who had trusted their government to use their deadly skills in service of legitimate objectives rather than private profit. The final confrontation between Ghost and her former commander would determine whether the truth about special operations, corruption would remain buried, or whether justice would finally be served for the men and women who had died protecting secrets that should never have existed. The revelation came through intercepted communications that Marcus had been monitoring from his position outside the Pentagon's secure communication perimeter. Elena listened through encrypted headphones as Vincent Hayes coordinated with Blackstone Strategic Solutions operatives, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who had spent years orchestrating the elimination of inconvenient witnesses. Ghost has surfaced as anticipated, Hayes said during a conference call that included representatives from 3 different private military contractors. The rescue operation confirmed her operational capabilities remain at peak effectiveness. Recommend immediate implementation of containment protocols. Elena felt her blood turn to ice as she recognized the clinical language that reduced human lives to operational problems requiring permanent solutions. Hayes was discussing her elimination with the same detached professionalism that she had once applied to legitimate military targets, but now she understood that her former commander had been weaponizing that same precision against American service members who threatened his criminal enterprises. Asset has demonstrated extreme range capabilities that exceed current contractor personnel training, another voice added, belonging to someone Elena didn't recognize, but whose accent suggested Eastern European military background. Recommend employment of counter-sniper teams with equivalent specialized training. Hayes laughed with cruel satisfaction. Ghost Squadron training was unique precisely because it couldn't be replicated through conventional programs. Elena Vasquez represents the last operational asset from that program, which is why her permanent removal is essential for continued operational security. Marcus handed Elena a tablet displaying financial records that his intelligence contacts had obtained through channels that operated in the gray areas between federal law enforcement and private security organizations. The documents revealed the scope of Hayes' corruption in terms that made Elena's stomach clench with rage and disgust. Hayes had been selling Ghost Squadron's operational intelligence to foreign governments and private military contractors for nearly a decade, monetizing classified information about American special operations capabilities, while systematically eliminating the people who could expose his betrayal. Each Ghost Squadron member who had died in supposed training accidents or operational mishaps had actually been murdered to protect Hayes' network of treasonous activities. He's been providing targeting intelligence to hostile governments, Elena said, studying communication intercepts that detailed Hayes' coordination with foreign intelligence services. Every time American diplomatic initiatives threatened to reduce military tensions, Hayes would provide precision targeting information that eliminated key negotiators and escalated conflicts. The pattern was as sophisticated as it was ruthless. Hayes had used his position in Pentagon oversight to identify diplomatic breakthrough moments, then coordinated with private contractors to eliminate specific individuals whose deaths would sabotage peace negotiations and ensure continued demand for American military involvement in profitable conflicts. The Syrian peace talks that collapsed after the chief negotiator was assassinated, Marcus observed, pointing to communication records that showed Hayes coordinating the timing of that elimination with Blackstone operatives, the Afghan tribal leader who was killed just before signing a ceasefire agreement, the Iraqi politician who died in a car bombing the day before announcing withdrawal negotiations. Elena recognized the locations and methods from her own service with Ghost Squadron, understanding with sickening clarity that Hayes had been using her skills and those of her teammates to serve private interests while convincing them they were protecting American national security. Every mission she had completed under Hayes's authorization had potentially served to enrich defense contractors while prolonging conflicts that could have been resolved through diplomatic means. Derek's training program was developing techniques that could have protected diplomatic personnel from the kind of precision targeting that Hayes has been selling. Elena realized, studying curriculum documents that revealed the true scope of Derek's work. If successful, foreign governments would have possessed countermeasures against Ghost Squadron methodologies. The assassination attempt on Derek Thompson hadn't been random violence or even simple elimination of a witness. It had been a strategic strike designed to prevent the development of defensive capabilities that could have threatened Hayes's most profitable operations. Derek's death would have eliminated both a potential witness and a developing threat to Hayes's ability to provide precision assassination services to the highest bidder. Elena felt the weight of betrayal settling over her like a physical burden. Every mission she had completed under Hayes's command, every target she had eliminated with perfect precision, had potentially served to undermine American diplomatic interests while enriching private contractors who profited from perpetual conflict. She had been a weapon in the hands of someone who was selling American military capabilities to anyone willing to pay the price. "There's more," Marcus said, producing additional intelligence that painted an even darker picture of Hayes's activities. He's been coordinating with foreign intelligence services to target American military personnel who develop capabilities that threaten established defense industry profits. The documents revealed that Hayes's network extended beyond simple corruption into systematic espionage designed to protect private military contractor market share by eliminating competition from official military programs. Ghost Squadron hadn't just been disbanded. Its members had been murdered to prevent them from developing alternative approaches to special operations that could have reduced dependence on private contractors. "He's not just selling our secrets," Elena said, understanding the full scope of Hayes's betrayal. "He's been eliminating American military personnel who could have provided more effective and less expensive alternatives to private contractor services." Elena began planning her response with the methodical precision that had made her legendary among special operations personnel. Hayes had spent years using official authority to arrange the murders of American service members, but he had made a fundamental miscalculation about Elena's capabilities and resources. He assumed that 8 years of civilian life would have reduced her to a manageable threat that could be eliminated through conventional security measures. Instead, Elena had spent those years developing capabilities that made her more dangerous than the ghost who had once terrorized enemies at impossible ranges. She had learned to operate without official support systems, to acquire resources through networks that existed outside government oversight, and to plan operations that couldn't be detected or countered through conventional security measures. "Hayes will try to arrange an accident during any official debriefing," Elena told Marcus as she began assembling equipment for an operation that would push her skills to their absolute limits. He'll use his Pentagon connections to create a scenario where my elimination appears to be the result of operational necessity rather than criminal conspiracy. Marcus consulted intelligence reports that confirmed Elena's assessment. Orders have been issued for your immediate return to Pentagon custody for debriefing regarding unauthorized participation in Derek's rescue. The paperwork includes authorization for lethal force if you resist cooperation. Elena smiled with cold satisfaction as she checked her rifle's mechanical systems and verified her ammunition load. Vincent Hayes wants to finish what he started 8 years ago, but this time he's not dealing with a soldier who follows orders without question. This time he's dealing with someone who understands exactly what kind of monster he's become. The hunt for Colonel Vincent Hayes would require Elena to penetrate security systems that had been designed to protect high-value targets from exactly the kind of precision elimination that she specialized in delivering. Hayes understood her capabilities better than anyone alive, which meant he would have prepared countermeasures that accounted for her training, equipment, and tactical preferences. But Hayes had also made a critical error in assuming that Elena's operational methods hadn't evolved during her years of civilian life. The ghost who had served under his command had been constrained by military protocols, official oversight, and the need to maintain plausible deniability for government operations. The woman who was now hunting him operated under no such limitations. Elena established surveillance of Hayes's Pentagon office using equipment that she had acquired through contacts in the private intelligence community. What she observed confirmed that Hayes was coordinating a complex operation designed to eliminate not just her, but Marcus Reed and anyone else who could provide testimony about Ghost Squadron's manipulation for private profit. He's bringing in foreign operatives, Elena reported to Marcus after 18 hours of continuous observation. At least 6 individuals with Eastern European military backgrounds, all carrying diplomatic passports that provide them with immunity from federal prosecution. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the implications. He's using foreign intelligence assets on American soil to eliminate American military personnel. Elena nodded grimly as she studied the tactical situation that Hayes was creating around his Pentagon office. These aren't private contractors or unofficial assets. These are active foreign intelligence operatives who have been granted official diplomatic status to conduct assassination operations against American citizens. The scope of Hayes's treachery extended beyond simple corruption into activities that constituted outright treason. He had arranged for foreign intelligence services to operate on American soil with official government protection, using their capabilities to eliminate American military personnel who threatened his criminal enterprises. Tomorrow morning, Hayes will call you in for official debriefing, Elena told Marcus as she finalized her operational planning. The foreign operatives will eliminate you during transport, making it appear that enemy agents targeted you because of your involvement in Derek's rescue. Marcus checked his secure communication equipment and verified that Elena's evidence packages had been distributed to journalists, congressional oversight committees, and FBI internal security divisions. The story is already breaking through channels that Hayes can't control. Even if he eliminates us, the truth about his activities will continue to spread. Elena adjusted her rifle's scope settings while calculating firing solutions for targets that would be protected by security measures that Hayes had specifically designed to counter Ghost Squadron methodologies. Hayes's death has to be absolutely clean and completely documented. No ambiguity, no opportunity for his network to claim that he was eliminated by foreign enemies or criminal organizations. The shot that would end Vincent Hayes's life had to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. It needed to eliminate a traitor who had betrayed American special operations at the highest levels, but it also needed to provide undeniable evidence of Hayes's guilt while protecting Elena from retaliation by his criminal network. Elena positioned herself in the Pentagon's central courtyard, During the pre-dawn hours when security was transitioning between night and day shifts, her infiltration had been accomplished using credentials and access protocols that she had obtained through networks that existed in the spaces between official agencies and private security organizations. From her chosen firing position, Elena could observe Hayes's office while maintaining communication, intercept capabilities that allowed her to monitor his coordination with foreign operatives and private contractor personnel. She watched through her scope as Hayes prepared for what he clearly expected to be his final solution to the Ghost Squadron problem. "Target acquired," Elena transmitted to Marcus, who was monitoring from a secure location outside Washington while prepared to implement contingency plans if the operation went wrong. Hayes is coordinating with 6 foreign operatives who are positioned to eliminate potential witnesses. Through her scope, Elena could see Hayes meeting with individuals whose military bearing and equipment suggested capabilities that matched her own training level. These weren't ordinary criminals or even standard foreign intelligence operatives. They were specialists who had been brought in specifically to counter Ghost Squadron capabilities. Hayes is distributing tactical profiles, Elena reported, observing the briefing session through her optics. Complete operational histories, training methodologies, psychological assessments. He's providing them with everything they need to predict and counter my potential responses. But Hayes had made a fundamental miscalculation about Elena's current capabilities and operational methods. The psychological profile he was sharing with foreign operatives described the Elena Vasquez who had served under his command 8 years earlier, someone who was constrained by military protocols and official oversight requirements. The woman, who was now observing him through a rifle scope, had spent years developing capabilities that weren't documented in any official assessment. She had learned to operate without support systems, to acquire resources through unofficial channels, and to plan operations that couldn't be predicted through analysis of her previous mission history. Elena controlled her breathing while calculating the precise moment when Hayes would be positioned for optimal engagement. Her shot would have to account not just for ballistic factors, but for timing that would place her bullet in exactly the right location to intercept Hayes during a moment when his guilt would be documented by his own security systems. Hayes is activating communication protocols with foreign intelligence handlers, Elena observed, listening through intercepted communications as her former commander coordinated what he clearly expected to be the final elimination of Ghost Squadron. Witnesses. He's providing real-time intelligence about American Special Operations security measures. The moment came when Hayes positioned himself at his office window while giving orders for Elena's assassination to foreign operatives, who were recording their conversation for intelligence documentation purposes. Elena's shot arrived at precisely the instant when Hayes was committing treason on camera, eliminating him while providing undeniable evidence of his criminal activities. Hayes died at his Pentagon office window, killed by a precision shot that demonstrated capabilities that only Ghost Squadron training could have provided, while security cameras recorded his final coordination with foreign intelligence operatives, who had been granted diplomatic immunity to conduct assassination operations against American military personnel. The aftermath of Hayes's death created a cascade of investigations that would ultimately dismantle the entire network of corruption he had spent years constructing. But for Elena, the immediate priority was escaping from the Pentagon before Hayes's foreign operatives could implement the contingency plans he had prepared for exactly this scenario. Elena withdrew from her firing position using routes that she had prepared during her reconnaissance phase, moving through Pentagon security systems that were designed to prevent exactly the kind of infiltration she had accomplished. Behind her, alarms were beginning to sound as security personnel discovered Hayes's body and initiated lockdown procedures that would trap anyone still inside the building. But Elena had anticipated the Pentagon security response and prepared alternative extraction methods that accounted for the building's defensive capabilities. She moved through maintenance corridors and service areas that weren't covered by standard surveillance systems, using knowledge of Pentagon architecture that she had acquired through intelligence contacts, who specialized in government facility penetration. The escape from Washington required Elena to evade not just American security forces who were investigating Hayes's assassination, but also foreign intelligence operatives who understood that eliminating her had become their highest priority objective. Hayes's death had exposed their operations to American counterintelligence scrutiny, making Elena's continued existence an unacceptable threat to their long-term activities. Elena disappeared into the network of safe houses and support systems that she had established during her years of hiding from Hayes's assassination attempts. But this time, she wasn't running from her past. She was moving to positions where she could continue hunting the people who had betrayed American special operations for private profit. The war between Elena Vasquez and the forces that had corrupted Ghost Squadron was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted dramatically in favor of the woman who had once been considered the most dangerous sniper in military history. Hayes's death had been only the beginning of a campaign that would ultimately determine whether American special operations could be restored to legitimate service or whether private interests would continue to exploit military capabilities for personal profit. The congressional hearing room was packed with journalists, military officials, and family members who had spent years seeking answers about the deaths of special operations personnel in training accidents that had never made sense. Elena watched from the public gallery as Derek Thompson, now fully recovered from his injuries, testified before the House Intelligence Committee about systematic corruption that had infected American special operations at the highest levels. Colonel Vincent Hayes coordinated with foreign intelligence services to eliminate American military personnel who possessed knowledge that threatened private contractor profit margins, Derek said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. With the authority of someone who had survived an assassination attempt orchestrated by his own government. The evidence recovered from his Pentagon office documents over 40 murders disguised as training accidents, operational casualties, and random crimes. Elena felt a quiet satisfaction as she listened to Derek present evidence that she had gathered during months of investigation following Hayes's death. The documents recovered from Hayes's office had revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond individual corruption into systematic betrayal of American military personnel by people who had sworn to protect them. Senator Patricia Morrison, chairwoman of the Oversight Committee, leaned forward with the expression of someone who was struggling to comprehend the scope of institutional failure. Mr. Thompson, are you saying that members of America's Special Operations Forces were deliberately killed by their own leadership to protect private business interests? Yes, ma'am, Derek answered firmly. Ghost Squadron wasn't dismantled because of security concerns. It was because our success posed a threat to the profits of private military contractors. Hayes and his allies systematically eliminated our team to stop us from developing alternatives that could reduce reliance on those firms. For 3 days, the congressional hearing had revealed layers of corruption, with testimonies from intelligence officers, Pentagon investigators, and FBI counterintelligence agents. Their combined evidence exposed a web of influence stretching through government, defense contractors, and foreign intelligence agencies, profit built on sustained conflict and unchecked military power. Much of the damning documentation had been delivered through encrypted channels, courtesy of Elena, whose covert efforts ensured investigators had the proof they needed. Her assassination of Colonel Hayes had been officially ruled a justified act by an unidentified individual, following his involvement in collaborating with foreign agents to orchestrate killings on American soil. Those operatives had been expelled quietly after tense diplomatic negotiations, avoiding international scandal. In exchange for discretion, their governments agreed to cooperate with U.S. intelligence efforts, an uneasy but useful arrangement. But the real success was changing the narrative around Ghost Squadron. Once buried in secrecy, their story had become a rallying cry for accountability in operations long hidden from oversight. As a result, Congress passed sweeping reforms mandating transparency in how special operations are funded and how military contractors are vetted. Alina slipped out of the hearing room as Derek's testimony ended. Walking the streets of Washington, a city she once served while wearing a uniform, believing she was defending something real, now she knew better. Her loyalty had been used, her missions manipulated by people who saw soldiers as expendable tools for profit. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Kate Robinson. A promising Army sniper, Elena had warned away from a training program eerily similar to the one that had nearly destroyed Ghost Squadron. Blackstone Strategic Solutions is officially shut down, Kate reported via an untraceable encrypted channel. 18 top executives arrested. Charges include espionage, conspiracy, and murder. The whole private contractor industry is under investigation. Elena allowed herself a small smile as she read further intelligence updates. Hayes's network was being dismantled piece by piece. Contractors were losing access to secure facilities. Pentagon officials were under indictment and new oversight. Measures were being implemented to block the abuse of privatized military power. She drove north, away from the capital and toward the mountains that had once served as her refuge, while evading Hayes's hit squads. But this time she wasn't running, she was returning with purpose. The gun shop in Millfield looked untouched, exactly as she'd left it. But Elena Vasquez wasn't the same woman who had closed that door weeks ago. In her civilian life, she was Chloe Martinez, a quiet gunsmith fixing rifles for weekend hunters. But beneath that identity was a mission protecting other soldiers from falling into the traps she had narrowly escaped. She set up a discreet surveillance network to monitor military training pipelines, flagging signs of corruption and exploitation. The shop became her base of operations, a silent fortress where she could coordinate protection for service members caught in gray zones between lawful service and unlawful orders. Her first visitor was Sheriff Tom Baldwin. He stepped into the shop holding a newspaper with the congressional hearings headline splashed across the front. He placed it beside a rifle Elena was cleaning, his eyes studying her with the wary curiosity of someone who'd long suspected there was more to her than met the eye. "Interesting story," Tom said. "Says here that elite snipers were killed off by their own command because their skills threatened corporate profits." Without looking up, Elena replied, "Tragic, isn't it? Makes you wonder how many good soldiers were discarded because someone decided they were bad for business." Tom nodded slowly, absorbing the weight behind her words. The article mentions one Ghost Squadron operative survived, helped blow the whistle. Someone so effective they had to be hunted, but never caught. Finally meeting his gaze, Elena gave him a measured look. Sounds like someone who spent years running from the very people she once trusted to watch her back. "I imagine that wasn't easy," Tom said quietly. "No," she said. "It wasn't. But I also imagine she found ways to stay useful, maybe helping other people who needed protection from forces they couldn't fight alone." Elena smiled for the first time since returning to Millfield. "Some people find their purpose through service, Sheriff. Doesn't matter if it's official or unofficial, as long as it serves legitimate interests rather than criminal ones." Tom left the newspaper on Elena's workbench and walked toward the door, pausing to look back at the woman who had become an essential part of Millfield's community, while maintaining secrets that reached into the highest levels of government corruption. If anyone ever needs the kind of help that official channels can't provide, good to know there are people who understand the difference between service and exploitation. After Tom left, Elena read the newspaper article that detailed the congressional investigation's findings about Ghost Squadron's systematic destruction. The story named Vincent Hayes as the primary architect of a conspiracy that had resulted in the murders of dozens of American Special Operations personnel, but it made no mention of how Hayes had ultimately been brought to justice. Elena understood that her role in exposing Hayes's network would remain classified indefinitely, which suited her perfectly. The most effective guardians operated from positions where accountability was personal rather than institutional, where success was measured in lives saved rather than recognition received. Her second visitor was Marcus Reed, who arrived carrying intelligence about Blackstone, Strategic Solutions International Operations, and the foreign governments that had purchased American military secrets through Hayes's network. Marcus had transitioned from his role in Derek's rescue to a position with congressional oversight, committees that were investigating the full scope of private military contractor corruption. "The investigation is expanding internationally," Marcus reported, spreading classified documents across Elena's workbench. Hayes's network included defense contractors, foreign intelligence services, and political officials from at least 6 different countries. The systematic elimination of Ghost Squadron was just one component of a much larger operation. Elena studied communications intercepts that revealed the global scope of Hayes's betrayal. He had been selling not just Ghost Squadron's operational intelligence, but comprehensive data about American Special Operations capabilities, training methodologies, and personnel assessments to anyone willing to pay the asking price. How many American soldiers died because Hayes sold their secrets to enemy governments? Elena asked, though she suspected the answer would be measured in hundreds rather than dozens. "We're still calculating the total," Marcus replied grimly. "But preliminary estimates suggest that Hayes's intelligence sales resulted in the deaths of over 300 American military personnel and operations that were compromised by information he provided to hostile forces." Elena felt the weight of systematic betrayal settling over her like a physical burden. Hayes hadn't just been eliminating Ghost Squadron members to protect his criminal activities. He had been systematically selling American military lives to foreign governments while convincing his victims that they were serving legitimate national security objectives. "There's something else," Marcus continued, producing intelligence reports that detailed ongoing threats to former Special Operations personnel. Hayes's network included sleeper cells that were activated to eliminate specific targets even after his death. At least 12 American veterans have been murdered in the past month by operatives who are working from target lists that Hayes distributed before his assassination. Elena understood that killing Hayes had been only the first step in dismantling the conspiracy that extended far beyond individual corruption. The network he had created continued to operate according to protocols that didn't require his personal supervision, meaning that American military personnel remained at risk from enemies who had been provided with detailed intelligence about their capabilities and vulnerabilities. "I need names and locations," Elena said, her voice carrying the focused calm that preceded operations where lives hung in the balance. "If Hayes's network is still active, then it needs to be systematically destroyed before more good soldiers die protecting secrets that were sold to their enemies." Marcus provided Elena with intelligence that identified active cells operating in 7 different states, all targeting former Special Operations personnel who possessed knowledge that Hayes's foreign associates preferred to keep buried permanently. The targets included snipers, demolition specialists, and intelligence analysts who had worked on programs that officially didn't exist, but whose capabilities could embarrass current and former government officials. Elena began planning operations that would eliminate Hayes's surviving network while protecting the American veterans who remained on assassination lists that had been distributed to foreign intelligence services. The work would require capabilities that pushed the limits of what one person could accomplish. But Elena had learned that some missions couldn't be delegated to people who operated under official oversight and accountability measures. She established a secure communication network that connected former Ghost Squadron personnel who had survived Hayes's systematic elimination campaign. The network included not just snipers, but intelligence analysts, communication specialists, and logistical support personnel who possessed skills that could be leveraged against Hayes's surviving associates. Ghost Squadron is officially disbanded. Elena transmitted during the first secure conference call that reunited survivors who had spent years hiding from their own government. But the people who served in legitimate operations deserve protection from criminals who exploited our service for personal profit. The response was immediate and unanimous. Veterans who had been living under assumed identities to avoid Hayes's assassination teams volunteered to emerge from hiding and coordinate operations against the network that had betrayed them. They understood that passive defense was no longer sufficient. Hayes's surviving associates had to be actively hunted and eliminated before they could complete their mission of silencing witnesses to government corruption. Elena coordinated operations across multiple states, providing precision targeting support for missions that eliminated foreign intelligence operatives who were conducting assassination operations against American veterans on sovereign soil. Each engagement was documented and transmitted to federal law enforcement agencies that were investigating the international scope of Hayes's conspiracy. The campaign lasted 6 months and resulted in the elimination of 43 foreign operatives who had been conducting assassination operations against American military personnel under the protection of diplomatic immunity that Hayes had arranged. Through his political connections, Elena's network systematically dismantled cells that had been operating for years without detection by official counterintelligence agencies. But the most significant victory was the establishment of an independent oversight organization that monitored private military contractor activities for signs of corruption or abuse. The organization operated outside official government channels, providing accountability that couldn't be compromised by political influence or financial interests that had corrupted traditional oversight mechanisms. Elena returned to her role as Chloe Martinez the gunsmith, but with a renewed sense of purpose that extended far beyond fixing hunting rifles for local customers. The shop became a coordination center for activities that protected American military personnel from exploitation by people who viewed soldiers as expendable resources rather than national assets deserving of protection and respect. Her third visitor was a young Marine corporal named David Chen, who had been recruited for a classified program that promised advanced training in exchange for participation in operations that couldn't be discussed with family members or civilian authorities. David had heard about Elena through networks that connected veterans who had learned to question official narratives about military service and personal sacrifice. "They say the program is voluntary," David explained, studying Elena with the careful attention of someone who had learned that official explanations often concealed dangerous realities. "But once you're in, you can't leave without facing charges for violating security clearances and compromising national security operations." Elena recognized the language from her own recruitment years earlier, the same carefully crafted phrases that made criminal exploitation sound like patriotic service, while trapping volunteers in systems that viewed them as expendable assets rather than human beings deserving of protection and respect. "What do you want from me?" Elena asked, though she already understood that David represented the next generation of soldiers who needed protection from people who monetized military service for personal profit. "I want to serve my country," David replied with the earnest conviction that Elena remembered from her own early years in uniform. "But I want to make sure that my service actually protects American interests rather than enriching private contractors who view soldiers as disposable tools." Elena smiled and reached for the business card that connected young service members to resources that Hayes's network had never discovered. The card provided contact information for the independent oversight organization that monitored military programs for signs of corruption while protecting service members who refused to participate in illegal activities disguised as legitimate operations. "There's always another way to serve," Elena told David as she handed him information that could save his life while protecting his ability to contribute meaningfully to legitimate national security objectives. "But it requires courage to question authority when authority has been corrupted by people who view military power as a tool for personal enrichment." As David left with resources that would help him avoid the trap that had destroyed Ghost Squadron, Elena felt the satisfaction that came from using her deadly skills for protection rather than elimination. The network she had established would continue operating long after she was gone, providing accountability and protection for American military personnel who deserved better than exploitation by people who had betrayed everything that military service was supposed to represent. The gun shop in Millfield remained exactly what it appeared to be, a place where an experienced gunsmith fixed hunting rifles for local customers while maintaining the kind of quiet anonymity that allowed her to live peacefully in a community that respected privacy and minded its own business. But behind that carefully maintained facade, Elena Vasquez continued to wage war against forces that threatened American military personnel through corruption, exploitation, and systematic betrayal of the principles that made military service meaningful. Ghost Squadron's true legacy wasn't found in classified mission reports or official commendations, but in the protection of soldiers who deserved to serve legitimate objectives rather than criminal enterprises disguised as national security operations. Elena had learned that some battles couldn't be won through official channels, but they could be won by people who understood the difference between service and exploitation, between protection and profit, between honor and betrayal. The mountains of Montana provided sanctuary not just for a woman who had chosen to disappear from official records, but for an ideal that military service should protect American interests rather than enrich private contractors who viewed soldiers as expendable resources in pursuit of personal profit. As long as that ideal needed protection, Elena Vasquez would remain ready to provide it, one rescued soldier at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.